The cold walls of the alien compound were all she knew. She had been brought here as a child, sold to the highest bidder. The alien race that owned her had no use for her except for one. She was a bed warmer. For years, she had been forced to lie beside them as they slept, heating their cold, harsh beds with her body. Her name didn't matter anymore. They didn't care about names. She was just the bed warmer, a tool to keep them warm. And as long as she stayed silent and did her job, they let her live. Every night she curled into a ball and tried not to think about how her life had become nothing but a series of long, cold hours in dark rooms, surrounded by strangers who didn't see her as a person. They only saw her as an object. She would hear them talk sometimes, whispering about her like she wasn't there. They would joke about how she had no worth, how she was just there to keep their beds warm. Nothing more, they said. But inside, she was dying. Every day, she wished for something, anything, that would break the chains that held her. A chance to escape. A chance to feel free, to be more than a tool for the cold nights. But those thoughts were dangerous. They could get her punished. They could get her killed. One evening, she was laying on the cold metal floor of a new room. She had been moved again. The other bed warmers were scattered throughout the compound, each in their own cold space, isolated. She didn't know why they moved her. Maybe they wanted to see if she would break. Maybe it was just another test. Either way, it didn't matter. She had no choice but to obey. As she stared at the walls, the silence felt heavier. The weight of years of slavery pressed down on her shoulders. She had no family, no friends. The other humans who had been captured alongside her were too afraid to talk to her. They all knew their place. The same place she had come to know. But then, something changed. She heard footsteps outside the door. The familiar sounds of the guards, heavy boots, the clank of metal against metal. But these were different. They weren't the usual guards. These steps were lighter, quieter, almost like someone was sneaking around. She sat up, straining her ears. A soft voice followed the footsteps, but it wasn't the gruff tone of a guard. It was a human voice. "What are you doing here?" she heard a man whisper. The voice sounded like it was speaking to no one in particular, but there was something in his words that caught her attention. She froze. She didn't dare move. Was someone here to rescue her? But why was he whispering? The door creaked open just slightly and a shadow appeared in the doorway. A human man dressed in the same plain clothing that most of them wore stepped inside. His eyes were wide, scanning the room, looking for something, or someone. He's different, she thought. He's not like the others. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her. Hope? Was it even possible to feel hope anymore? The human looked around, and his eyes stopped on her. She quickly looked away, hoping he wouldn't notice her. She was nothing more than a bed warmer. What could he want with her? But then, to her surprise, he took a few steps toward her. Slowly, carefully. Not like a guard. Not like someone who was here to hurt her. He seemed, cautious. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said softly, his voice gentle. "I'm not here to hurt you." She stayed quiet, unsure of how to respond. Was this some kind of trick? Was he trying to get her to trust him so he could turn her in? He knelt down in front of her, keeping his distance but looking at her as if she mattered, as if she was a person, not a thing to be used. "I'm new here," he said. I don't want to be here, but I don't know what to do either." His voice was shaky, but there was something about him that felt different. Maybe it was the way he spoke, the way he didn't look at her with pity or anger like the others did. He just looked lost. The girl's heart beat faster, her mind racing. Was this some kind of hope she was feeling? Or was it just her imagination? "I've seen you," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. "You always sit here every night, never complaining, never asking for anything, but I can't stand it anymore. I can't just watch." Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to say something, but the words wouldn't come. What could she say? What could she ask for? She had spent so long in silence, in fear, that even the thought of speaking felt like a betrayal. He seemed to sense her hesitation. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I wanted you to know that I see you, and I want to help. If you want it. The girl's mind was spinning. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever seen her as anything but an object. But this human, he had seen her. He had looked at her, and he had felt something. Could this be the beginning of something else? Could it be possible to have hope again? The days passed slowly after their first encounter. The girl couldn't stop thinking about the human who had come into her room that night. He had been so different, so unlike the others. He hadn't treated her like she was nothing more than a bed warmer. For the first time, someone had treated her like she was more than just an object to be used. She lay on her mat, staring at the cold ceiling, her heart still beating faster every time she thought about him. His words echoed in her mind. I see you. That was a lie, wasn't it? No one saw her. No one cared. But for a moment she wanted to believe him. The next day she was waiting, as usual, when the door opened. This time, the man stepped inside quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. He didn't look like a guard, but he was still careful, like someone trying not to be noticed. His eyes met hers, and a small, nervous smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Hey, he whispered, taking a step closer. I didn't mean to disturb you last night, but I wanted to make sure you were okay. The girl didn't know how to respond. She had never spoken to anyone like this before, not in years. The thought of saying anything felt like a risk she wasn't sure she was ready to take, but something inside her was pushing her to speak. Something about the human's presence made her feel safe in a way. His gentle voice was different from the harsh words she heard from the others. She felt like he understood something that no one else did. I'm okay, she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She could hardly believe she had spoken. It was so rare for her to say anything, but she had to say something. The man nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers as if he were trying to read her thoughts. I don't believe that, he said gently. No one should be okay in a place like this. No one should be treated like a tool. Her heart skipped a beat. Like a tool. That was exactly what she was, wasn't it? For years she had been nothing more than something to heat beds, something to be used and discarded. She lowered her gaze, feeling a wave of shame rush over her. She had never told anyone how she felt, never allowed herself to feel anything but emptiness. But now, for some reason, she felt like she wanted to cry. Could it be possible to feel something other than numbness? The human seemed to sense her struggle. He knelt down in front of her, keeping his distance but looking at her with kindness in his eyes. Listen, he said quietly. I don't know what you've been through. I can't even imagine it, but I promise you, you're not alone anymore. She felt her breath catch in her throat. What was he saying? Was he offering her a way out? Was it even possible for someone like her to escape? The girl wanted to ask him questions, to demand answers, but she couldn't find the words. She had spent so long silenced by fear, so long locked away in her own mind that speaking freely felt impossible. But the human didn't seem to expect anything from her. He just sat there waiting, his expression open and sincere. I'm here because I can't just accept this, he said. I know it's risky, but I have a plan. I've been watching and I think we can escape. Escape. The word hung in the air like a dream, something she had almost forgotten was even possible. Her mind raced as she looked at him. Could she trust him? Could she really leave this place? Was there a way out? I can help you, he continued. I've been gathering information, watching the guards, learning their patterns. We have a chance, but we need to move quickly. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was it. This was the chance she had dreamed of. But fear still gripped her. What if it was a trap? What if he was lying, pretending to care just to get something from her? But as she looked into his eyes, something inside her told her he wasn't lying. She couldn't explain it, but she knew. He had a sincerity in his gaze that she couldn't ignore. It was a kind of honesty she hadn't seen in anyone for years. I don't know, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know if I can trust you. The human didn't take offense. Instead, he gave her a small, reassuring smile. I understand, but we don't have much time. I'll show you. We can start small, gather supplies, learn the guard's shifts, find weak points in the system. It's a risk, but we have to take it if we want to escape. The girl swallowed hard. The idea of escaping had always seemed so far away, something she couldn't even imagine. But now, with this stranger's words filling her mind, it felt more real. It felt like it could actually happen. I don't know if I can do it, she whispered. The human's smile softened, and he reached out, touching her arm gently. His touch was warm, real, and it made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. You don't have to do it alone, he said. I'll be with you every step of the way. For the first time, the girl allowed herself to believe. It wasn't just a dream. This could be real. There was a way out. There was a chance for freedom. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face it alone. As the days turned into weeks, the girl found herself growing closer to the human. His presence, once a mysterious curiosity, became a source of strength. Every night they would meet in the dimly lit room, where the others slept soundly, oblivious to their quiet conversations. It was risky, but she trusted him now. He hadn't given up on her, even when it seemed like everyone else had. The human's name was Ethan. He didn't talk much about his past, but the little bits he shared hinted at a life filled with struggle. He had once been a soldier, he said, but now he was just another prisoner in this cold place. His eyes were haunted, as if he carried the weight of battles fought and lost. But when he spoke to her, there was a softness that made her believe in him. At first, they spoke in whispers. He told her about the escape plan he was building, carefully, slowly, piece by piece. He had been watching the guards, learning their schedules, finding weaknesses in the system. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. Tonight we start small, he said one evening. I've noticed a guard shift change at midnight. The new guard is distracted. It's the perfect time to move around the compound without being seen. The girl's heart pounded in her chest as she listened. A plan, a real plan. She had never dared dream that she would be part of something like this. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled, a flash of warmth in his eyes. To the supply room. We need to gather some things, food, water, anything that will help us when the time comes to run. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of excitement. She was going to do something. She wasn't just going to lie there and wait for the next day to be the same as the last. She was going to be part of something. That night, they moved quietly through the compound, their footsteps muffled by the cold stone floors. The girl followed Ethan, her heart racing. It was strange. She had always been taught to fear even the smallest movements, to stay hidden. But now, with Ethan by her side, she felt a strange sense of purpose. They reached the supply room without incident. The guards were changing shifts just as Ethan had predicted. The room was dimly lit, with shelves stacked high with food and equipment. The girl's eyes darted around, her mind spinning with the possibilities. She had never been in this room before. It felt like a different world. We'll take just what we need, Ethan whispered. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. She nodded, her hands trembling as she reached for the first bag of supplies. It felt like they were on the edge of something monumental, like they were defying the system that had held them captive for so long. As they filled their bags with food and water, the girl couldn't help but wonder what came next. How far would they go? What would happen if they were caught? She had lived her life in fear, always anticipating punishment for the smallest mistake. But with Ethan, there was something else. Something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, they could escape. When they finished, they crept back to their rooms, each step filled with the kind of tension that made the girl's stomach churn. She could feel the weight of the supplies in her bag, the reality of their escape plan settling in. "I'll see you tomorrow," Ethan whispered before he left, his hand briefly touching hers. The touch was warm, grounding her in the moment. "Be careful, don't let anyone see you." As she lay on her mat that night, her thoughts were filled with excitement and fear. Tomorrow, they would try again. This was only the beginning, but it felt like it could be the start of something bigger, something she had never dared to believe in. Freedom. The next few days passed in a blur. The girl kept her head down, pretending to be just another bed warmer while her mind raced with plans and possibilities. Every night she met with Ethan, and each time, they took another step forward in their escape. Small steps, but they were moving. And for the first time in years, she felt like she had control over something in her life. But even as their bond grew stronger, she couldn't help but wonder, what would happen when they finally left? Would they be able to make it far, enough to escape the system that held them in its grip? Or would they be caught before they even had a chance? One night, as they shared their plans in the shadows of their hidden room, Ethan turned to her with a look that sent a chill down her spine. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low. "The escape. It's not just about getting away. It's about taking down the system. If we do this, it's going to change everything." The girl's breath caught in her throat. What did he mean by that? Taking down the system? It sounded dangerous, impossible. But Ethan's eyes were steady, filled with a determination she had never seen before. "We're not just running. We're fighting back. And if we succeed, it will mean more than just freedom for us. It will be a symbol for everyone else here." Her mind raced. Could they really do that? Could they really fight back against the system that had kept them prisoners? For so long, she had never imagined it. But as she looked into Ethan's eyes, she saw something that made her believe it was possible. "I'm with you," she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in years. Ethan's expression softened, a small, grateful smile crossing his face. "Together," he said softly. And in that moment, she knew. This wasn't just about escaping. This was about something much bigger. They were going to change everything. The girl couldn't sleep. Her heart was racing as she lay on her mat, staring at the ceiling. Tonight was the night. They had everything in place. Ethan had gathered more supplies, extra food, water, and tools that would help them escape the compound. The time had come for action. The girl had always believed that escape was just a dream, a fleeting thought that came and went in the silence of her nights. But now it was real. Ethan had shown her that it was possible to leave this place, to walk away from the life she had been trapped in for so long. It had taken months of planning, careful observation, and endless risk. But tonight, they would make their move. The human had explained every step to her. They would wait for the guards to change shifts, just like before, and then sneak out through the maintenance tunnels, the ones hidden behind the old storage room. They would travel in the darkness, avoiding detection by staying low to the ground. The guards, if they were even paying attention, wouldn't notice their absence until it was too late. The plan sounded simple enough, but her heart still trembled with doubt. What if they were caught? The consequences of failure were too great to even imagine. But every time she looked at Ethan, she felt a surge of hope. He had confidence in her, in both of them, and she couldn't help but believe in him, even if it meant facing the unknown. The hours seemed to drag on, every second feeling like an eternity. The girl clenched her fists, trying to steady her nerves. The room was eerily silent, save for the occasional shuffle of a fellow prisoner, too lost in their own thoughts to notice what was happening in the shadows. Finally, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, growing louder. It was time. The girl quickly stood, her legs trembling beneath her. She felt like a different person in that moment. Alive with purpose, ready to step into a world she had only ever dreamed about. For the first time, she was taking control of her destiny. Ethan appeared at her door, his face determined. "It's time," he whispered. The girl nodded, her throat tight. She couldn't say a word. Instead, she followed him into the dark corridor, every step a silent prayer that this would work. They moved quickly but quietly, passing by the rooms of other prisoners, each of them unaware of the escape that was happening right beneath their noses. The compound was as silent as it always was, but there was a feeling in the air, one of tension, of change. As they reached the maintenance room, the girl's heart thudded in her chest. They had made it this far, but this was where the real test began. The hidden tunnel was just behind the shelves of supplies. Ethan slid the shelves aside with ease, revealing a narrow, dark passageway that led into the unknown. The girl hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the tunnel. It smelled musty, like forgotten things. The walls were damp, the air thick with the scent of stale dust. They crouched low, moving as fast as they dared. The narrow space felt suffocating, but it was their only way out. The girl's hand shook as she clutched the small bag of supplies, the weight of the world seeming to rest on her shoulders. But she kept moving, step by step. "I've memorized the layout," Ethan said quietly, his voice echoing off the walls. "We just need to keep moving. We'll reach the outer compound in about an hour. Once we're there, we can climb over the fence and disappear." The girl nodded, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The escape was close, so close she could almost taste it. But with each passing minute, her nerves grew. What if they were caught? What if the guards noticed them? What if it was all for nothing? "Stay close," Ethan murmured. His hand brushed against hers, offering reassurance in the dark tunnel. It was a small gesture, but it made her feel like she wasn't alone, like they were in this together. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The sound of their breathing was the only thing that filled the silence. Time seemed to stretch, each minute a test of patience and willpower. The girl focused on Ethan, following his every move. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not now. Not when they were so close to freedom. They rounded a corner, and the tunnel seemed to open up, leading them to a large steel door. Ethan pressed his ear to it, listening for any sounds on the other side. After a long pause, he nodded. "It's clear," he whispered. "Let's go." With one final push, they opened the door, stepping into the cool night air. The stars were hidden behind dark clouds, but the dim light from the compound's security lamps cast an eerie glow over the desolate landscape. The girl's heart raced as she took in the sight of the world beyond the compound. It was vast. It was freedom. But they weren't free yet. Ethan led her across the yard, staying close to the shadows. The fences loomed ahead, tall and impenetrable, but Ethan had already planned a way over. He pointed to a section of the fence that was weaker. The metal bent and twisted in a way that made it possible to slip through. They approached the fence carefully, glancing over their shoulders to make sure no one had seen them. The guards were still in the main compound, unaware of the prisoners slipping away into the night. The girl's pulse raced as she crouched by the fence, ready to climb. Ethan went first, his movements swift and sure. He reached the top and looked down at her, offering his hand. "You're almost there." The girl took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had left. She climbed up the fence with trembling hands, feeling the cold metal scrape against her skin. She reached the top, and for a moment, she froze, staring down at the dark ground below. It was a long drop, but it was nothing compared to the life she was leaving behind. "Jump!" Ethan called from below, and with that single word, the girl leapt. She landed on the other side of the fence with a thud, her legs buckling beneath her, but she didn't care. They were out. They were free. They stood there, panting, their hearts racing with the thrill of their escape. The girl looked at Ethan, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We did it," she whispered. "We're free." Ethan's face softened, and for the first time she saw a real smile on his lips. Yeah, we did. But as they turned, the night air was cool against her skin as they hurried through the dark, their steps quick and purposeful. The girl's heart was still racing from the climb over the fence. Her lungs burned from the effort. But there was something that made her feel alive for the first time in years. They had made it. They were out. Ethan walked ahead of her, his strides long and confident. He was always one step ahead, guiding her through the shadows, leading them further away from the compound with every step. The sound of their breathing was the only thing that broke the silence of the night, and with every passing minute the girl's sense of hope grew stronger. We just need to keep moving, Ethan whispered, glancing back to make sure she was still close behind. The city is about 10 miles from here. We'll make it by dawn. Her mind raced as she followed him through the unfamiliar terrain. She had never been outside the compound before. The world felt bigger than she had imagined. The stars above were sharp and clear, shining like a beacon in the dark, guiding them toward freedom. But even as her heart soared, something gnawed at the back of her mind. There was an unease, a feeling she couldn't shake. It was too easy. They had made it, this far without a single obstacle. It didn't make sense. They reached a small clearing and Ethan stopped, turning to face her. We need to rest for a few minutes, he said, his voice calm but urgent. I'll scout ahead and make sure the path is clear. The girl nodded, her body trembling from exhaustion, but she didn't question his decision. She trusted him, completely. She had to. As Ethan disappeared into the darkness, she sank to the ground, her thoughts swirling. She had always been told that escape was impossible, that there was no hope for people like her. But now, here she was outside the compound with the world stretching out before her. The human had made it all possible. He had believed in her when no one else did. But as she sat there, a feeling of dread crept over her. The night had been so quiet, too quiet. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, scanning the trees for any movement. Nothing. Minutes passed, but Ethan didn't return. The girl stood, her heart pounding in her chest. Something was wrong. She had been taught to listen to that feeling, that nagging voice in her head that told her when things weren't right. Ethan? She called, her voice trembling. No answer. The fear in her chest grew stronger as the silence stretched on. She stepped forward, her eyes darting between the trees. Where was he? Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. But it wasn't Ethan, it was a guard. The girl froze, her heart sinking. You thought you could run? The guard sneered, stepping into the clearing with 2 more of his comrades. You should have known better. The girl's breath caught in her throat. A trap. Ethan had been a part of it all along. She couldn't believe it. All this time, all the hope, the trust, it was all a lie. But then, just as quickly as the anger surged within her, a different thought pierced through. Ethan couldn't have known. He had to have been tricked, just like she had. This wasn't his fault. He had to be out there somewhere. He couldn't have betrayed her. The guards were closing in, their weapons drawn. The girl backed away, her heart hammering in her chest. She had to run. She had to find Ethan. She couldn't let this be the end. Don't try to run, one of the guards warned. We'll catch you, just like we caught him. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. They had Ethan. He was in their hands, and they were using him as bait to catch her. They had never intended to let her escape. The guards had known the whole time, and Ethan, he had been part of it all along. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to stay steady. No, she thought. I won't give up. Not now. Not after everything we've been through. She bolted, her feet pounding against the soft earth as she ran blindly into the night. The guards shouted behind her, their heavy footsteps chasing her down. She couldn't look back. She couldn't afford to. Her lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, faster. She didn't know where she was going, but it didn't matter. She had to escape. She had to get to Ethan, no matter the cost. The sound of the guards grew louder, closer. They were gaining on her. She could hear them shouting commands to each other, closing in from all sides. But just as she thought they would catch her, a shadow darted out of the trees, blocking her path. It was Ethan. "Go!" he shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the cover of the trees. "Run! I'll hold them off." She hesitated, disbelief flooding her mind. Ethan? He hadn't betrayed her after all. He had come back for her. But he was too late. The guards were nearly upon them. "We don't have time," Ethan shouted, his voice desperate. "Go! Now!" Without thinking, she took off again, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know how long she ran. The world blurred around her as she ran through the trees, pushing herself until her legs couldn't carry her anymore. Finally, she stopped, breathless and trembling, her body aching from the effort. She glanced over her shoulder, but there was no sign of the guards. She had outrun them. For now, Ethan had saved her. She didn't know how he had escaped the guards, but somehow he had managed to get to her in time. She was safe, for the moment, and that was all that mattered. But as they lay hidden in the trees, exhausted and shaken, the girl couldn't shake the thought that lingered in her mind. The betrayal. It had come from the inside. Someone had known about their plan. And that someone was still out there. Ed to leave, a faint sound reached their ears. The distant hum of a siren. The chase had begun. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the sound of their ragged breaths as they crouched in the underbrush. The girl's heart still raced from the narrow escape, but there was no time to rest. They were deep in enemy territory now, and every second counted. Ethan, breathing heavily beside her, was scanning their surroundings, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow, his posture tense. "They'll be looking for us," he muttered, his voice low, barely a whisper. "We can't stay here long. We need to find shelter before morning." The girl nodded, trying to calm her racing pulse. She had never been so far from the compound, never ventured into the world beyond. The darkness seemed endless, the night stretching out before them like an ocean of uncertainty. Every tree, every rustling leaf felt like a threat. They had outrun the guards for now, but they couldn't hide forever. Ethan motioned for her to follow as he led the way deeper into the forest. His movements were quick and deliberate, his body trained for this kind of survival. The girl, still unused to the outdoors, struggled to keep up, her feet stumbling over rocks and uneven ground. "What happened back there?" she asked, her voice trembling with confusion. I thought you were with them." Ethan didn't answer right away, but his face tightened, the pain in his eyes betraying the weight of his thoughts. They had been running for hours, but the truth of what had happened back at the clearing still felt like a cloud hanging over them. "I didn't know," he said, his voice hoarse. "I had no idea they were setting us up. I thought—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I thought they were on our side. They promised me they would let us go, that we could escape together. But someone tipped them off. Someone knew about our plan." The girl's chest tightened at the words. Betrayed. The word echoed in her mind, the sting of it making her heart ache. She had trusted him, trusted them, and in the end, they had used her, but Ethan hadn't known. He was just as trapped as she had been. "It's not your fault," she whispered, placing a hand on his arm, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "We couldn't have known." He nodded, though the guilt still lingered in his eyes. "We can't let it stop us. We have to keep going. We can't let them win." The girl swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in. They couldn't stop now. They had come too far. But the world outside the compound felt vast and dangerous. She had never imagined it would be like this. Even the trees, the sky, everything felt different, unfamiliar, as though she had stepped into a world she didn't belong in. As they pressed forward, the sounds of the night grew louder. The wind whistled through the branches and the distant hoot of an owl echoed in the stillness. The girl felt exposed, vulnerable. Every rustling leaf felt like an alarm. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "You're doing great," Ethan said, glancing over at her, his voice filled with encouragement. We just need to keep moving, we're almost there. Where? She asked, her voice small. Where are we going? Ethan hesitated, his gaze distant. There's a safe house, he said quietly. It's not far. I've been there before. A place we can rest, regroup. It's hidden. No one will find us. She nodded, her mind racing. She couldn't imagine what it would be like to truly be safe, to feel like they were no longer running, no longer fighting for their lives, but she couldn't afford to think about that now. They had to get there first. Hours passed and the girl's exhaustion weighed on her like a physical burden. Her legs ached, her body trembling from the constant strain, but she kept pushing, forward. She had no choice. The night was growing colder, and the shadows of the forest seemed to close in around them. Just as she thought she couldn't go any further, Ethan stopped. His eyes narrowed, scanning the area around them. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his voice tense. The girl froze, listening. There was a sound in the distance, a low hum, like the sound of engines. "They've found us," Ethan muttered, his face hardening. "They're close." Panic surged through the girl's chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. They couldn't be caught now. Not after everything they had gone through. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her to a crouch behind a thick tree trunk. He pulled out a small rusted device from his bag, pressing it against his ear. It was some kind of communication device. His fingers moved quickly as he adjusted the settings. "They've got a tracker on us," he said, his voice filled with frustration. "They know exactly where we are." The girl's stomach dropped. They couldn't get away. They had been so close, but now, "We need to move," Ethan said urgently. "Now." Without waiting for her response, he grabbed her hand and started running again, his pace faster now, more desperate. The girl could barely keep up. Every step felt like it could be her last. The fear in her chest was a suffocating weight, pushing her faster, urging her forward. The sound of the engines grew louder, closer, until the trees ahead of them parted, and they came to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a black vehicle, sleek, military-grade, and heavily armed. Ethan skidded to a stop, pulling the girl behind a large rock for cover. "They've got the whole compound looking for us," he said, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "We won't make it unless we stop them." The girl's mind spun, her thoughts racing. They couldn't outrun them. They couldn't fight back. They were cornered. But then she saw it, the glint of a small device in the corner of her vision. She didn't know what it was, but she instinctively knew it was their chance. "Ethan, look," she said, her voice a mix of fear and hope. Ethan turned, following her gaze. His eyes widened when he saw the device. It was an old communications jammer, half buried in the dirt. Without hesitation, he reached for it, and in a moment of quiet desperation, he pressed the button. The vehicle's lights flickered, and then the hum of the engines cut off completely. "We did it," the girl whispered, her heart pounding. But the battle wasn't over yet. The chase had just begun. The sound of the engine sputtering to silence echoed in the clearing, filling the air with an eerie stillness. For a moment, neither Ethan nor the girl moved. They were hiding behind the large rock, watching as the black vehicle, once humming with life, now lay still. The heavy thud of their hearts was the only thing they could hear, pulsing in their ears like a drumbeat of hope and fear. The girl's breath was shallow, her chest tight with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. They had done it. They had actually done it. The device had worked. The vehicle, one of their pursuers, had been disabled. But they weren't out of danger yet. The night was far from over. Ethan motioned for her to stay low, his eyes scanning the clearing for any sign of movement. He reached out, grasping her hand, pulling her up slowly. His grip was firm, reassuring, but his face was set with the quiet intensity of someone who knew the battle wasn't over yet. "Come on," he whispered, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to move before they send more. There's a hidden path just beyond the ridge. It leads to a safe zone." The girl nodded, trying to steady her shaking legs. She was so tired, so utterly drained. But she forced herself to move, to keep up with Ethan as he led the way through the trees. The sounds of the forest around them were muted, as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Each step felt heavier than the last, her body protesting with every movement. But she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. The thought of what awaited her back at the compound, what awaited both of them, pushed her forward one step at a time. They didn't speak as they made their way through the forest, their eyes darting from side to side, watching for any signs of danger. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot made her jump. But she held her breath, focusing on nothing but the sound of Ethan's footsteps and the rhythm of her own heartbeat. It felt like hours before they finally reached the ridge. From the top, the girl could see the dim lights of a distant settlement. Small, scattered houses surrounded by trees. It looked so peaceful, so far removed from everything she had known. "We're almost there," Ethan murmured, a rare note of relief in his voice. "Once we get down to the settlement, we'll be safe. No one will find us there." The girl's heart fluttered with cautious hope. Safe. It was a word she hadn't allowed herself to think about in years. To be safe, to be free from the fear that had consumed her entire existence. It seemed impossible, like a dream she had never dared to dream. But as they began to descend the ridge, a faint noise broke through the quiet, the sound of footsteps, fast, heavy, and coming from behind. Them. The girl's stomach dropped. Her first instinct was to look for cover, to run deeper into the woods, but Ethan held her back with a firm grip on her arm. "They've found us," he said, his voice grim. "We don't have time to hide. We have to make it to the settlement, now." With no choice but to trust him, she nodded and ran. The moonlight above barely lit the narrow trail they followed, but Ethan knew the way. He was a step ahead, his movements quick and confident. The girl kept pace, forcing her legs to move faster, ignoring the burning ache in her muscles. The footsteps behind them grew louder, and she could hear the shouts of the guards. They were getting closer. The girl's breath hitched in her chest, and panic gripped her once more. Would they make it? Would they reach the settlement in time? Suddenly, the sound of the guards' footsteps stopped. A faint crackling noise followed, a radio signal. Then a voice, distorted but clear enough to understand. "They're getting away. We need reinforcements. Don't let them escape." The girl's heart sank. Reinforcements? They couldn't outrun more of them. They couldn't keep running forever. "Ethan, what do we do?" she gasped, her voice barely audible over the sound of her pounding heart. "We fight," he said, his jaw set with determination. "We make our stand here. If they're coming for us, we give them a reason to stop." Before she could say another word, Ethan had stopped in his tracks, pulling out a small, compact weapon from his bag. It was old, worn, but the sight of it in his hands gave the girl a strange sense of reassurance. "We can't run anymore," he said. "We have to hold them off long enough to give us a chance." He crouched low behind a large boulder that bordered the trail, pulling her down beside him. The girl's mind raced as she pressed her back to the cold stone, trying to steady her breathing. She didn't know how to fight. She had never had to. But she knew one thing. If they didn't fight now, they would never make it to freedom. She nodded, swallowing her fear. "What do I do?" Ethan looked at her, his expression hardening as he checked the weapon. "Stay low. Stay quiet. If they get too close, you run. I'll cover you." The girl's heart skipped a beat at his words, but she couldn't argue. There was no time to argue. The sounds of footsteps grew closer, the crunch of dry leaves underfoot, announcing their approach. She could hear the shouts of the guards growing louder as they neared the ridge. The girl clue,